911, what's your emergency?
It's the zoo. He fell. He's inside the tiger enclosure.
Stay calm. Can you see him now? Are the animals near him?
There are families here. They didn't expect this.
Mr. Zhang was mauled by 3 tigers in front of his family at a public zoo in Ningbo, China. His death was gruesome and preventable. This was no stunt, no dare, just one irreversible mistake. If stories like this leave you breathless, subscribe, like, and tell us in the comments. Should humans ever stand that close to apex predators? Mr. Zhang was a father in his early 40s, described by relatives as quiet, hardworking, and devoted to his young son. On that winter day, the family set out for what was supposed to be a simple outing to the Yunggor Wildlife Park in Ningbo, a privately operated safari-style zoo in eastern China. His wife and child entered through the front gate, purchasing standard tickets, while Mr. Zhang, reportedly hoping to save money, or perhaps simply unaware of the full implications, made a fateful decision. Surveillance footage and witness testimony later confirmed that he scaled a tall wall near the park's perimeter zone, marked with faded signs in Chinese characters warning of restricted access. The area he entered wasn't just any shortcut, it bordered the tiger enclosure, a semi-natural space that housed 3 adult Siberian tigers. Some witnesses at the scene would later testify that he appeared calm, even oblivious, as he crossed a secondary fence and walked into what he may have believed was a safe, open area. It was not. His choice wasn't one of arrogance or thrill-seeking, but of tragic miscalculation born from either a misunderstanding of the layout or an underestimation of the risk. Meanwhile, his wife and child were already inside the viewing area of the tiger habitat, unaware that the man they loved was moments away from entering it from the opposite side. This was not the first time a Chinese zoo had witnessed such a preventable horror. In 2016, a similarly devastating incident occurred at Beijing's Battling Wildlife World, where a woman was mauled and killed after stepping out of her car in a drive-through tiger safari. That incident, too, raised national debate about zoo safety, signage clarity, and human behavior in proximity to dangerous animals. But despite the outcry, many parks, including Yunggor, remained lenient in their enforcement of visitor boundaries, with cost-saving often prioritized over proactive safety infrastructure. Visitors had long reported minimal staff supervision and poor signage, especially for those unfamiliar with the park's layout. In Mr. Zhang's case, there were warning signs, but they were easy to miss, faded, aged, and mounted at odd angles. No guards stopped him, no alarms sounded. And in that quiet, tragic oversight, the script of disaster wrote itself. Mr. Zhang becomes the archetypal, tragic protagonist in this story, a man driven not by recklessness, but by an everyday impulse to take a shorter path, to avoid inconvenience, to meet his family faster. He didn't climb the wall to see tigers up close. He climbed it to cut through space he believed was safe. But nature does not forgive poor guesses, and a boundary misunderstood is no less lethal than one defied. Within minutes, his misjudgment would place him not on a walkway but in a predator's hunting ground. A father's shortcut had become a fatal misstep. The Yunggor Wildlife Park did have sign placards mounted on walls, staked in the dirt, warning visitors in Mandarin not to cross into unauthorized areas, not to climb barriers, and certainly not to enter enclosures. But there were no electric fences, no pressure sensors, no posted guards, and no physical structures that would have made such a crossing impossible. In a country where tourism and entertainment often outpace regulation, these paper-thin safeguards are tragically common. Mr. Zhang, seen on blurry footage walking along the perimeter, seemed unaware he was moving toward danger. Multiple guests later stated that they thought he was a zookeeper at first, moved with such calmness, no urgency, no sign of panic. When he crossed into the tiger zone, shouts rang out. One bystander yelled to him in Mandarin, "Sir, stop! That's not allowed!" A park employee also reportedly shouted from a distance. But in the sprawling, open-air environment of the safari zone, it was too little too late. Whether Mr. Zhang heard them at all remains uncertain. The tigers, however, heard everything and saw even more. Wildlife behaviorist Dr. said, Shen Lu later explained, to a captive tiger, a human crossing a boundary doesn't register as a rule breaker. It registers as prey. It's not hatred. It's not rage. It's instinct. Tigers are ambush predators by design. Their mental map of territory is primalone step too close, and the switch flips. There's no reasoning, no mercy. Once inside the psychological boundary, the human becomes a threater, a target. In interviews following the attack, zoologists and animal psychologists offered a collective warning that has echoed after nearly every fatal encounter like this one. Do not mistake exposure for familiarity. One of the most dangerous beliefs a human can hold near a captive apex predator is that it knows them. That proximity over time means the animal has changed, adapted, or softened. This illusion is especially potent in zoos, where barriers feel like contracts, and predators often appear lazy, passive, or even playful. But as Dr. Lu put it bluntly, captivity changes the animal's options, not its instincts. A tiger that has spent years behind glass or fencing has not been trained, it has simply been constrained. Once that constraint is removed or breached, the tiger behaves exactly as evolution intended. The public debate following Mr. Zhang's death reignited fierce criticism of Chinese zoo safety standards, where budget constraints often lead to minimal staffing, outdated signage, and haphazard fencing. Many of these parks operate as privately owned attractions with minimal government oversight, and in some cases, little to no emergency response infrastructure. In the words of an unnamed staff member speaking to local press, "We give the warnings, but the warnings aren't walls." That chilling remark would be repeated across Chinese social media in the days after the mauling. Mr. Zhang did not charge the tigers. He didn't taunt them, provoke them, or trespass in rage. He merely stepped too far. And the animals behaving as animals did, what they were wired to do. Mr. Zhang landed in the moat with a thud, his feet kicking up sand and loose grass as he steadied himself. What he did not know, what no human can instinctively sense, is that 3 pairs of amber eyes were already locked on him. Siberian tigers, the largest of their species, known for their patience and near-silent stalking, had been watching. From the shade-dappled edge of the enclosure, one tiger rose. Another crouched low. Visitors inside the viewing area began to scream not at him, but for him. Dozens of smartphones were already recording as the first tiger approached with a calm, terrifying certainty. Mr. Zhang didn't run. He stood still, paralyzed not just by shock, but by disbelief. In the minds of most humans, captivity means safety, and animals in zoos are considered spectacle, not threat. But the tiger moved as if the fences had never existed. Within seconds, the strike came swift, low, and aimed at the legs. Zhang fell, and the second tiger was already flanking. A massive paw struck his upper back, pinning him with ease. What followed was not a quick kill, but a grim, prolonged domination. Unlike lions, who often suffocate prey rapidly with throat clamps, tigers attack to disable. The first bite tore into Zhang's shoulder, the second into his neck. He screamed, briefly, then his body began to jerk. The third tiger joined from behind the trees, dragging him further into cover as zoo staff scrambled. Firecrackers were thrown from an upper platform's nap and pop, smoke in the air, but the tigers didn't flinch. High-pressure hoses were turned on, jets of water blasting toward the enclosure, but the predators merely shifted, growling in irritation without loosening their grip. From the viewing deck, Mr. Zhang's wife collapsed to her knees, sobbing as their child clung to her leg. She called his name again and again, her voice hoarse and cracking. The tigers dragged him behind a rock cluster, out of sight. Witnesses said the screams stopped within minutes, but the tigers did not. For nearly 20 minutes, the attack continued while zoo staff deliberated their options. Tranquilizers take too much time. A decision was made. A rifle was brought forward. One tiger, the most aggressive, was shot once. It staggered, growled, then collapsed near the rock where Zhang had fallen. The others finally retreated. But it was far too late. The man's body, barely recognizable beneath blood and torn clothes, was retrieved only after the tigers had been cleared from the area. His death was not clean, it was not cinematic, it was primal. Experts later explained that this type of mauling is not rage-driven, it is procedural. Tigers do not kill to punish, they kill to neutralize. And once the process begins, it does not stop until the prey no longer moves. Mr. Zhang was not hunted out of hatred, he was simply out of place, one step past the line. One step into a code of nature that does not forgive hesitation. The horror wasn't just in what the tigers did, but in how utterly unsurprised they were to do it. In the aftermath of the mauling, the initial focus turned to the most visible question: how could a man so easily enter a tiger enclosure in broad daylight, in front of hundreds of witnesses, and be left to die? Yunggor Wildlife Park officials were quick to issue statements blaming Mr. Zhang for the tragedy. He had ignored posted signs. He had climbed a wall not meant for public use. He had violated the rules. But as footage circulated and details emerged, the public conversation shifted. The wall he scaled, according to drone images and visitor photos, was little more than a concrete Legino barbed deterrence. No electric fencing, no surveillance cameras monitoring its perimeter. It backed onto a sparsely patrolled area of the zoo, and for all practical purposes, it offered a direct and open path into the inner territory of apex predators. There were warning signs, yes, but no one stopped him. Not because they couldn't, but because no one was there. No guards, no cameras, no layered defenses. And when the emergency began, the zoo's response was telling. Tranquilizer equipment was not ready. Firecrackers and water hoses were deployed only after critical minutes passed. The rifle used to shoot the tiger had to be retrieved from another area, costing even more time. These were not systems designed for rapid intervention. They were improvised reactions to a disaster that should never have been possible. Yunggor is a privately owned facility, like many of China's wildlife parks. In the race to build attractions and capture the exploding domestic tourism market, these parks often operate under lax regulatory frameworks, with profit motives dictating everything from enclosure layout to staff-to-visitor ratios. Safety becomes reactive, not preventative. And in this case, one man's life was the cost of that calculation. The outrage didn't remain local. Online commentators and animal welfare groups pointed to a disturbing global pattern. In 2012, a man in India was mauled after falling into a tiger pit while taking a selfie. In 2018, a woman in Russia entered a bear enclosure for a photo and was fatally attacked. Even in the United States, in 2007, a 17-year-old was killed by a tiger that escaped its enclosure at the San Francisco Zoo after having been taunted. But escaping a space that should have been escape-proof, each case reveals the same grim truth. Boundaries are only as strong as their design, and humans consistently overestimate their control over wild animals. These so-called open zoos, marketed as immersive and naturalistic, blur the line between spectator and spectacle. But at what cost? When tigers live behind ditches and shrubs rather than bars and walls, when fencing is minimal to improve photo opportunities, the illusion of safety grows stronger, but the safety itself grows thinner. Mr. Zhang did not die because of one mistake. He died because a system allowed a single mistake to lead to death. His story raises a question that haunts every wildlife park built for show. Are we building sanctuaries or time bombs waiting to detonate with the next misstep? In the hours following the attack, the enclosure where it occurred was cordoned off, the viewing platforms emptied, and a heavy silence settled over the zoo. One of the 3 Siberian tigers was dead, shot by a rifle after firecrackers and water hoses failed to stop the mauling. The other 2 were eventually lured back into a holding area, unharmed. But the public was far from quiet. News of the incident spread rapidly, and by nightfall, Chinese social media had ignited with fierce, polarized debate. Some demanded all 3 tigers be put down, arguing that once they had tasted human blood, they were too dangerous to keep alive. Others, including conservationists, pushed back with fury. These were not rogue animals. They had not escaped. They had not disobeyed. They had reacted precisely as nature intended when a human crossed into their domain. "You cannot punish a tiger for being a tiger," wrote one zoologist. It was Mr. Zhang who crossed the line, not the animals. Staff at the zoo were reportedly devastated. Siberian tigers are critically endangered, with fewer than 500 in the wild. The animal that was shot had been born at the facility, raised in a semi-natural enclosure, and had never shown aggression toward humans behind the glass. A zookeeper told local media, anonymously, "We raised him from a cub, we gave him names, but we were wrong to believe that meant he was safe." Mr. Zhang's wife, who witnessed the entire attack from the viewing platform, was seen screaming uncontrollably, collapsing to the ground as her husband disappeared behind a cluster of trees. Her child stood next to her, motionless, eyes fixed on the space where the man had just stood. In the following days, she released a brief public statement. "He didn't mean to do anything wrong. He just wanted to be with us." Her grief was echoed in the testimonies of other zoo visitors, some of whom now suffer from trauma symptoms. "I can't stop hearing the screams," said one man in a video interview. "I came to see animals. I saw death." The story spread not just as a tragedy, but as a societal mirror, reflecting the delicate and often ignored tension between humans and the predators we insist on keeping close. Mr. Zhang became a symbol not of defiance, but of human fragility in the face of wildness we do not truly understand. His death reignited a critical conversation among animal behaviorists about the habituation paradox, the dangerous assumption that exposure breeds safety. When humans are near wild animals long enough, we begin to believe the animals have changed, that their instincts have softened, that captivity has tamed them. But instinct is not domestication. It is only delayed. The tragedy at Yungor Wildlife Park wasn't born from cruelty or recklessness. It was born from the illusion that proximity is the same as protection. Mr. Zhang did not try to touch the tiger, feed it, or taunt it. He simply stepped where no man should have stepped and paid the price for a myth we all share. From a scientific perspective, the attack on Mr. Zhang was neither unpredictable nor unprecedented, was a textbook case of territorial reactivity from an apex predator. Tigers are ambush hunters, neurologically wired to respond to intrusion with swift, calculated violence. They don't kill out of rage, they kill out of reflex. The moment Mr. Zhang entered that enclosure, regardless of his intentions or body language, he became a trespasser in the most primal sense. Behavioral ecologist Dr. Lian Tao put it bluntly in a televised interview. That tiger didn't disobey. It behaved like a tiger should. To the animal, this wasn't a man it had seen behind glass. This wasn't a keeper. This was a warm-bodied anomaly in its terrain, a potential threat or prey. And in the brain of a tiger, those two are dealt with the same way. Experts emphasize that captivity does not erase instinct. What it does more dangerously is dull the boundaries between predator and human. Repeated exposure to visitors leaning close, tapping glass, posing for photos creates what researchers call habituation. The tiger stops seeing humans as novel, but it doesn't see them as safe. It simply registers their presence as part of the scenery until one crosses the invisible line. That's when the scenery moves, and the predator's instincts take over. This illusion of intimacy, the idea that being near a dangerous animal makes it less dangerous, is tragically common. It's seen in zoos, safari parks, private ownership cases, and social media influencers posing with big cats. But nature isn't sentimental. As one field biologist said after the incident, once a human enters the enclosure, the rules change completely. The case of Mr. Zhang is not an isolated tragedy. In 2007, Tatiana the tiger at San Francisco Zoo escaped her enclosure after being taunted, killing one teenager and injuring two others. Investigations revealed that the wall she leaped over was 4 feet lower than industry standard. In 2018, at Beijing Wildlife Park, a woman was killed and her mother mauled after exiting their car in a drive-through safari. Each case followed the same formula: human error, structural failure, instinctual response. In every instance, the aftermath included new fences, added signage, and updated emergency protocols, but always too late for the one who died. Following the death of Mr. Zhang, Yunggor Wildlife Park installed additional fencing and added surveillance cameras to the perimeter wall. But those improvements now stand as memorials more than protections. They are corrections made in the wake of tragedy, evidence that the danger had always been there. What unites these cases is not just poor design or oversight, it is the human belief that intention matters to a wild animal. That love, curiosity, or the harmless desire to take a shortcut can somehow override biology. But biology doesn't care. It doesn't weigh motive or context. The tiger doesn't ask who you are or why you're there. It sees movement, it senses vulnerability, and it reacts as nature has shaped it to react over millennia. Mr. Zhang walked into a place built to simulate wildness. What he found was the real thing. In the days that followed the tragedy, the blood was scrubbed from the enclosure floor, the trees hosed down, the barrier reinforced with a few more signs. But the echoes remained. Screams captured on cell phones, the collective gasp of a watching crowd, the sobs of a wife who had come for a family outing and left with a nightmare burned into her child's memory. Mr. Zhang's death did not become a national scandal. It became something quieter, an uncomfortable cautionary tale filed into the protocols of wildlife park management, referenced now in staff training manuals and risk briefings. Trainers are told his story not to scare them, but to remind them. All it takes is one step, one misjudgment, one broken link in the chain of assumptions we place between humans and wildness. In an internal memo leaked months after the incident, a park official wrote, "He didn't mean to enter their territory." But the tigers didn't ask for meaning. His family filed suit against the park, citing negligence and inadequate safety infrastructure. But the case never reached a courtroom. A private settlement was reached, its terms undisclosed. The zoo continues to operate under the same name, with modest upgrades, more posted warnings, a few more staff on patrol, but no meaningful structural redesign. The wall Mr. Zhang climbed still stands, now bracketed by security cameras, its base marked with flowers for a while until rain and time washed them away. A quote began circulating online in the weeks after his death, painted onto protest banners and reposted beneath footage of the attack. "Love animals, but never forget what they are." It became the unofficial epitaph of a man whose final mistake was believing the boundary was symbolic, not biological. The final footage of the story does not show the attack. It shows what came after. Children peering through plexiglass barriers at pacing tigers, their reflections merging with stripes. Visitors standing in silence, reading the new warning signs. A single bouquet of artificial lilies tucked beside a viewing bench, left by an anonymous hand. The zoo guide speaks softly now when they reach the enclosure. No more jokes, no more roar impersonations. Just a pause, a reminder. What happened to Mr. Zhang was not a spectacle, it was a rupture in the illusion that nature can be safely packaged for human consumption. The closing question remains unanswered, but it lingers like a breath before glass. Do we protect nature by admiring either, by respecting its distance? The story ends not with outrage nor resolution, but with reflection. Because no matter how many signs are posted or fences reinforced, the wild does not change for us. We must change for it. Or, like Mr. Zhang, we must accept that one step too far can cost everything, and that nature, beautiful and merciless, does not forgive missteps.